Oh, hey guys, we're gonna make some trance leads on Sylenth1 because that's not overdone. And yeah, no, that's basically the introduction. We're gonna make some trance leads. Um, Sylenth1 is a plugin synthesizer that doesn't actually come with FL Studio. So if you got FL Studio, don't look for this. You're not gonna find it. And what you'll have to do is go online and purchase it or not. That is your preference. Although it only costs about $100, I think, maybe 120. It's really not that expensive considering how powerful and straightforward and kind of simple this synthesizer really is. So I do recommend every producer have this just because it's just so great. I use it all the time. I used to use Nexus a lot, but now I converted almost 100% to Sylenth1, and all my sounds are basically made from Sylenth1. And I'm going to show you what I'm kind of like my signature thing first, and then we're going to go look into basses and other stuff, and I probably will do that later for another tutorial. However, this one will be more concentrated on leads such as trance leads. And first thing I want to let you know is this right here, the shape, the saw shape is what we call it, sawtooth. This is basically the primary shape or waveform that is used for trance leads, and sometimes we use the square tooth. However, this would be the prominent one or the more prevalent shape. So expect me to use sawtooth a lot. Now I'm not going to do what you've probably seen in a lot of tutorials, which is just like jack the voices up to 8, take off a retrig and like detune it 100% or whatever. I actually do try to look into different possibilities. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of Sylenth1, so some of you who are not familiar with Sylenth1 will at least somewhat understand what's going on here. Alright, so for any synthesizer, or whenever you're trying to make a sound, you gotta choose your waveform. That's kind of a thing. You have to kind of know what your waveform is, and you gotta know how many voices you want, like a unison amount of voices coming in from that exact same shape. So you could just have one, or you could have more than one, and that will give you a bit more of a stereo image. So if you want like a huge wide spat saw lead, you should have 8 voices, or the highest amount of voices you can, so that it fills up as much room on the stereo image as you want. But I'm going to keep it at 1 because we're going to make this little pluck first, and then we'll keep on developing it. So this is the wave. This is oscillator 1, I should let you know if I didn't already. This is oscillator 1. Waveform, you choose the waveform here. This is all analog, by the way. You choose your voices, and we're going to look at volume, phase, detune, and that's basically it. We also have a choice of octaves, so we could have, if I hit C5, if I hit octave +1, it's C6. If I hit octave -1, it's C4. So there you go, it just kind of changes it for you. You can also change the note. And you can use that to make chords. Fine tuning is important as well. You can also invert it. Doesn't really sound like anything. You need to have something else layered on top for it to sound like anything. And the retrig button, which honestly I don't really know what it does technically, but I know that when I have retrig on and I detune it with like 8 voices, for instance, I find it sounds a lot more like classical kind of analog sounding. But if I have retrig off, I can make something that sounds a lot more kind of like super saw, classic super saw like. But I'm going to keep retrig on for now because I'm not really going to be using the detune, and I'm just going to have one voice. And I mean, I think people kind of underestimate what you can do with retrig on. So there you go. So let's just keep it like this. We're going to use one oscillator. We're going to have one voice, one sawtooth, and that's it. We're not going to go too much more complicated than that. However, in a way, I guess we are, because we also have things like the amp envelope, which changes the timing and the way your instrument works as far as how long it takes for the sound to come in. Call that the attack. How long it takes for it to start like decaying, which is decay, and sustain, which kind of work together. And when you're done, when the sound is done, is it going to release any type of sound? And that's the release. So holding on to that concept, the modulation envelope is the exact same concept, except for instead of talking about the instrument itself, it refers to anything you want. It refers to cutoff or resonance or key track drive, the LFO, I don't know, anything. And it gets kind of hard to wrap your head around at first, but then you kind of do understand after you kind of messed around with it. So what we have to do is we have to activate a filter. Now the filter control is all here. This is the master filter control, so it affects both part A and part B, which by the way you do have. However, this is filter A, so this only affects oscillator A1 and A2, and then there's B1 and B2. But yeah, so filter A, we're gonna make it a low pass filter, so it looks like kind of like this. It reminds me of the Above and Beyond logo, Arjuna Beats. Don't really know why. And yeah, that's it. So right now, I do not know why. Oh, it's because the cutoff is 100% low. Alright, so if we have both cutoff in the very center of 12 o'clock, it's about 150 hertz right now. We're not letting in a lot of high frequencies, but the more we bring the cutoff to the right, the more we're bringing in high frequencies. Try to keep your eye up here where the equalizer is, so see how it's just low sounding? And that's how you make wobble basses as well, by wobbling the cutoff. Anyway, so what we're going to do with the modulation is we're simply going to take that cutoff and we're going to make it so that it starts from a higher point and then it drops down. You know what I mean? And that makes a plucky kind of sound. So we wouldn't want to have an automation clip doing that for us, so that's why we have the the modulation envelope. And we have 2 of them, just in case we want more. And then, well, technically we have 4 of them. We have 2 selections for 1 modulation envelope and another 2 for another modulation. So in this particular case, we want to modulate the cutoff knob. So I know you can't really see all these. There's plenty of selections, but what we want to modify here is the cutoff. Now you can choose whether you want just the cutoff on the A section or the cutoff on the B section or both. I say we just do A right now because that's all we really have activated. So what you have to do, we have to pretend that this knob right here is our cutoff knob. So let's say we want this to advance from here. This is kind of like if the cutoff knob was over here as well, but it's not. It's just like imaginative. So we're kind of putting our cutoff knob around here, but this is kind of like a ghost knob, so it can kind of morph into anything, if you know what I mean. But let's say we put it at 4 right now, and we take the decay, and we bring it up to maybe 4, 2. So we got 4, 4 in value. You can look at the numbers here or up there, and essentially it's like you're taking the cutoff, you're bringing it up here, and every time you hit the note, it just goes back down. So it's like you hit the note and it goes back down in a certain amount of time, and that certain amount of time is defined by the decay. And you can also use attack and other stuff, but we're just going to focus on this knob and the decay. So if I shorten the decay, the cutoff knob will come down faster. So now we kind of create a bit of a plucky kind of sound. And if I bring the cutoff knob down a bit, I'm sure a lot of you kind of heard that before. So look at the equalizer. Every time I hit the note, see how that high end kind of drops? That's exactly what's happening with the modulation. Now we do want to make it so that every note is pretty short, so I'm just going to take off all the sustain and just have the decay. maybe a little bit of release. I can't really play proper arpeggios right now just because of the delay or the latency in the notes, but not a big deal. So we also need to have delay. You can also do this on the mixer, but you can also do it on Sylenth1. So that's just echo, as I'm pretty sure you all know that. So yeah, that's trance lead number 1 actually. That's pretty much it. You can also add distortion. So let's say we put the only real distortion you use for trance, I find, or most EDM in general, is decimate, because it's really subtle and it sounds really cool. You could do some cool stuff with it. Yeah, I'm sure you use overdrive and bit crush as well, but I find like a very prominent one is the decimator. So you just kind of have to mess with it, be really, really precise with where you put the knob. See, that sounds a lot better, right? And whenever that happens and I come up with something that I really like, you can go up here on this drop down arrow and save the preset as, and every time you want to have that preset back, you can go over here in all your presets. Now this is all the presets I've came up with, except for the ones on the very left. So this will probably be in the preset pack. Not all of them, you know, because some of them aren't really that great. But yeah, so you know, I tend to reuse a lot of my sounds. So that is one. So if I take the voices, and I'll take off the distortion for now. If I take the voices and I increase that to 8, for example, honestly, it's just going to sound louder. But if I take the oscillator 2, and I layer another sawtooth on top of that with 8 voices, again, it's probably just going to sound louder. However, you can phase through the sawtooth to make a different kind of sound. So phasing is pretty good to change the characteristic of your sound. So if I take the sustain and I bring that up, and I'll remove the modulation for now anyway. That's what we're left with, but we're going to bring up that cutoff. So we want all our frequencies right now. So one big thing for making trance leads, like over the top kind of super sol kind of leads, is the detune. So if I bring the detune up, that's going to kind of fluctuate the way the pitch sounds. It's also going to change the stereo image of the sound. So if I bring that all the way up to 5, I wouldn't recommend you bring the detune much higher than 5, because after that it's starting to sound pretty hard style, kind of really messed up sounds. I forgot to mention, fine tuning without any detune is really useful as well. If we don't have any detune and we fine tune our sound, you can come up with some pretty cool stuff as well. It's kind of like having a guitar that's a little bit out of tune, but it still kind of sounds nice. I know I had my guitar slightly out of tune a little bit for a little while, and I never tuned it because I just liked the way it was a little bit out of tune. But yeah, so let's say we have this detuned around 3, and this detuned around 3. So these two sawtooths being identical. And then we went to part B. Did the exact same thing, sawtooth, sawtooth everywhere. And I know this is really generic, but you know, it has to be done. And we took the octave, we brought it up 1 octave. So this sawtooth here is 1 octave higher than the other ones. And we made the detune 50% or 12 o'clock, whatever. And maybe we did the same thing here, or maybe we could bring it lower. So bring the octave down. Now, it's not really that great. I'll be honest, this doesn't sound very good. Although you could use a little plucky sound for like an actual lead. Copy paste that over. All I did different here was I made the sound a lot shorter, so I brought the decay down for both sides. And what you can do is have one side where the decay is like that, one side where it isn't. I'm going to take off the retrig on both sides so that we can have a more generic supersaw sound. So on one side we have this really plucky sound. I'm going to get you guys to listen to that. And on the other side we have, and together you got this plucky kind of supersaw. Now what I just did there is I hit 4 notes at the same time, which didn't work because my polyphony is 3 and I can only hit 3 notes at once. So if I can just bring that up to 16 just in case, because I want to hit a lot of notes at once. And you can use stuff like reverb to kind of enhance the sound. You know, adding effects is typically a good idea, especially if you're gonna like mix in your song and add a little bit of stereo image. So yeah, that would be kind of a more trance like supersaw. There's a lot of stuff you could probably do with this. With the cutoff, you can also add drive, which can definitely add power. It's kind of like distorting it because you got overdrive here, which is just basically overdriving it. But just a little bit of drive is nice. Sometimes that was way too loud, way too powerful, but just a little bit maybe. Bring the resonance up. Personally, I liked how it sounded earlier on its own. You can also do a little bit of EQing on Sylenth. Now, if you're getting tired of that, I suggest what you do is change the waveform. So we could change it to having one on square tooth. Let's have this one. Or have this one on square tooth. Or just any other sound, shape, whatever you like. That's where the whole experimental part comes in. But yeah, so I wish I could keep on going. We're already on 20 minutes. The fact that I had to teach you Sylenth1 and make things on Sylenth1 was kind of difficult, because I know not all of you actually are familiar with Sylenth1. But I hope this does kind of give you a quick idea on how to make leads. A lot of stuff like this works for house. Exact same concept, maybe lesser of the pluck here. But I find house is a little bit different as far as I guess it depends. I'm not really too familiar with the genre, I'll be honest, but I find that some house tracks use just retrig on, and would have like a let me see, less detune maybe, and they would use the modulation and maybe some LFO, which is just basically if you hold a note, something is going to change over time in a fluctuating manner, and that fluctuating manner is defined by the waveform. So in this case, it's a wave. So if I have the cutoff fluctuating, it'll fluctuate in a wave kind of pattern. You know what I mean? Like just back and forth. But it can change if I have like a sawtooth. It'll just kind of like, it'll fluctuate differently in a different form, if you will. It's hard to explain. If you want to add a little bit of character, like I think they do this in house too, is they add a sine wave in the back. But yeah, so I hope this helps as far as people making leads and whatnot. If you're in doubt, definitely stick to the sawtooth for most genres. Also play around with, if you ever have like a really thin sound, try to play around with the distortion. If I made the distortion here with a much thicker sound, it'll just sound really broken and it probably won't sound very nice. But with the little pluck like I showed you earlier, it tends to work because it's such a thin sounding unison that it's just you can really mess with it with things like distortion and whatnot. There's so much else that I didn't really go through, but you know, this is the start of, I hope, many tutorials, and you know, I'm thinking of doing basses next or something, and you know, kind of going through some LFO stuff. There's a lot of effects and whatnot you can do, especially with pitch bends and whatnot. And we just kind of created this build thing just by changing the pitch on the modulation. I didn't even change any of the characteristics of the actual sound itself. So it's interesting with this type of stuff you can do just by changing little things like the pitch and whatnot. So there you go. I hope this helped someone, and this was kind of like an essential video because I think making sounds is essential. I was going to make more of a kind of side thing, which is like how to make kind of a, I don't even know what I was going to do other than this, like some sort of like weird genre kind of tutorial, and I didn't want to come back with that because this right here, what I'm doing here, associates to everybody. No one can really complain too much about learning how to make your own sounds, because a lot of people, I think, are struggling with this, especially because I get tutorials on how to make, you know, things on Sylenth1 and whatnot. So anyway, I'm rambling on. And there you go. So I'll talk to you later. And oh yeah, I'm working at Dairy Queen now, so that's why I haven't really been on YouTube very much. For those of you who don't live in North America, because I'm pretty sure it's only, you know, restricted there, Dairy Queen is a wow, I don't even know. It is a restaurant where they sell ice cream and fast food, and it's actually pretty good. Some things are good, some things aren't good. But I guess that's, you know, that's personal preference. It's just a fast food joint. I work at a fast food joint, so there you go. But anyway, I'll talk to you later, and yeah, goodbye.